Content presented on the following show by any host or by any guest should be used solely for your entertainment and enjoyment. The views and opinions of the following show are not necessarily those of the Whole Care Network, other show hosts on the Whole Care Network, or advertisers on the Whole Care Network. Shows on the Whole Care Network are not intended to treat, diagnose, or claim to cure any disease or condition. Always consult a professional when making any changes to your physical, spiritual, mental, or financial health. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
How do you want to be cared for as you age? By planning now, successful aging is in your control. Welcome to Your Future Self, featured on the Whole Care Network. On Your Future Self, we share real-life stories and trusted resources to help you plan for your care. And now, here are your hosts, Monica Stenchula and Christopher McClellan. Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of Your Future Self, because it's in your control. I'm your co-host, Christopher McClellan from the Whole Care Network, and I'm already in trouble with my other co-host, Monica Stenchula from Reunion Care. Monica, am I forgiven early on in the podcast?
You certainly are, Chris. You're always forgiven by me. It's so good to be here. I'm so glad we're going to be talking about our future self, Chris. I'm really excited about doing this series with you.
Because it's in our control, isn't it?
It is. It may not feel like it always, and that's why we need to discuss this, because sometimes we don't feel like we do have control over what's happening, but we actually do. I think together we can help to give some insight into, how to take back control over what's happening in your world. So I just can't wait, Chris. I'm really eager to get us started.
And, I think it's okay to be self-revealing. We're really kind of products of the 60s.
Yes.
And as we think about our future selves, and we both have a caregiving background, we want to really formulate a plan, help our listeners formulate a plan to care for themselves as we, I'll say that word, age.
Chris, I think what's important about this is not about the fact that we're aging. It's
right.
Are we going to have more life in the years we have ahead, or are we just going to be aging and deteriorating? And I think that the fact that we're going to be talking about self-care today is our opportunity to really reflect on, what do you want these years ahead? We're not going to sit back in a rocking chair, and no one's handing us a gold watch at 65. What is it going to be for our future self?
Exactly. And I don't know about you, but I know for me, I'm aging gayfully, but that's for a whole other discussion. But on today's podcast, we are discussing our first pillar of the Whole Care Network, our pillar of care, which is self-care. And goodness gracious, St. Ignatius, we know that self-care is that elusive goal that every caregiver seems to miss as they go on to their caregiving journey.
Chris, as I reflect on now that I've been a caregiver for my father, but I've also raised my children, the similarity between the two things is when it's over. And I don't mean that. I mean, when you're done actively caring for other people, you kind of feel this void, and you kind of think, who am I? Or what am I? And hopefully by our discussions together, we can help people not sacrifice so much and instead take care of themselves as this journey goes on. And so that you don't have to look back and say, well, who was I then? But life is more than that. Life is about who is Monica as well. And that's what we need to focus on as we go through this process.
Well, and self-care, where it has so many different meanings to it. And as we talk about our pillars, as we move through our podcast, our physical pillar, our social pillar, our spiritual pillar, our financial pillar, it's interesting when you think about self-care, how all 4 pillars combine with self-care.
Absolutely. It's all part of, do you remember, since you brought up the 60s, I mean, you got
I
the yin
did,
and the
didn't I?
yang, and you got this tie-dye, like, you get I mean, life is it's a composite of a lot of things. It's not
Right.
one we're not just defined by our caregiving, we're defined by many things around that. And the same with ourself. I mean, there's many facets to who we are. But today, we want to focus on the physical part
Physical.
of
We're
who
going to
we
focus
are,
on the physical. Yes.
right, and why that's important to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. Chris, I want to ask you a question. Can I do that?
Well, of course, you're the co-host.
All right, thank you. So, Chris, when you were taking care of your partner,
Yes.
tell me from the time your caregiving experience started, physically, how did you do through that whole process, your whole caregiving journey? Do you feel like physically you were taking care of yourself? What happened with you?
Well, I think in looking back now, you lose yourself in the midst of caregiving. You forget about the most important person in the role of caregiver, then that is yourself. And hindsight is 2020, and I
Right?
think that's one of the reasons why we continue to be advocates for caregivers, because we want to share our experience, because it's through the experiences where people really grasp what's going on with themselves. And I didn't have that when I was in the midst of caregiving. I forgot about taking care of myself. And what's interesting, and I hear this, and I'm sure you do too, from many caregivers across the nation, the person who wants you to take care of yourself the most is the person that you're taking care of, because they know you are their lifeline.
Ah, that's a really good point.
And we often forget this in the middle of caregiving, when we're so focused on doing for somebody else that we forget to take care of ourselves.
Absolutely. The activities of daily living, all of those tasks that you have to do throughout the day can really come to dictate how your life progresses. And we know that as caregivers, it's easy to get on that wheel and just keep on keeping on. And that's not going to serve you well as an individual. And so we need to talk about what it is you need to build into those days for self-care. That is really important. It needs to be self-care.
It needs to be built in, and it could be as easy. Can I put quotations over a word on a podcast?
You certainly can. You just did it. Go ahead.
I just did. It could be as easy as setting a daily intention for yourself.
Yes. Yes. Or as easy as, oh, sorry, I just did it too, Chris. I just did it too. I just called it easy as well. But,
Because it is. When you think about it, it is easy when we put our minds to it.
okay, but with any habit that you want to develop, Chris, how many times you have to do that habit, do you think, before it becomes a routine? You have to do it for 3 weeks. It has to be consistent for 21 days before it becomes part of your routine. So whether it's setting a daily intention, so it's not that if I do it today, then now it's a habit. No, 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 no. You got to keep at it, and you have to be committed to, okay, this is going to become a part of my life. My youngest son taught me something, and it's always good to learn from your kids after you taught them for so many years. He taught me to keep a gratitude journal. And
A
at first,
gratitude journal,
yeah,
that is.
yeah. And at first it was just strange to me because I'm like, I'm tired. I'm going to sleep. I don't need to do this. But once I committed myself to it, kept it right next to my bed, and it didn't have to be something lengthy, nor did it have to be some kind of, like magical prose. It just had to be, what was I grateful for that day? And Chris, now I don't close my eyes without thinking and writing, what am I grateful for today? What was the blessing of today? And it became a habit.
That could be your daily intention.
Yes, absolutely. But Chris, we're here to talk about the physical side of making those kind of habits. And I don't,
Oh,
yes. So
and
Chris,
that,
have you been a lifelong exerciser?
well, it only depends on what life we're talking about at that time. Like a lot of us, I've had that roller coaster of health and wellness experience where I'm diligent, I'm out walking, I'm out riding a bike, I'm rollerblading when I was less than 60. But in the midst of we're recording this podcast in the midst of the coronavirus, and there's been a lot of people, like myself included, who have spent more time inside than outside.
That's right. That's right. Life has its seasons just as the year does. And so for all of us, there are seasons when we're better at it and seasons when we're not. But regardless of the season, one of the things that's important about self-care is taking care of your own body. I had the opportunity to do a session at a conference with a fall prevention specialist. She's a nurse practitioner. And what we were talking about is how, if you are not physically ready to lift and transfer someone, how much damage you can do to your body.
Right.
And I know that caregivers, this happens all the time because someone urgently needs to get out of bed to get to the bathroom, or something has happened and you need to get that person up and moving quickly, or pivot them even once they're up and moving so that they don't fall. If your body's not physically ready to do that, the chances of being injured are higher. Yeah.
And let's face it, when we get into our role as a caregiver, where most of us, if not all of us, unless you're in the medical profession, are untrained. You're doing this out of, well, most of us are doing it out of love, care, and commitment. But love, care, and commitment can only go so far if you don't really know the ins and outs of how to transfer somebody.
And one of the saddest statistics on caregivers is many of them end up with physical injuries and long-term chronic injuries as a result of caregiving because of something that is a mishap. It wasn't intentional negligence. It happens. And one way to prevent that is to know that your daily exercise, just getting up, stretching, or getting out and taking a walk, that is important to you for being an effective caregiver as it is for your personal health. So you're not doing it just for yourself. You're doing it for the person you care for as well. So as we look forward, one of the things we need to make sure that we are intentional about, Chris, is knowing when we're ready to start a program, an exercise program, and then keep to that program so that it becomes a habit for us. So that if you don't go out and walk up and down the beach, Chris, in the morning, you feel like you missed something, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I was thinking about how oftentimes we let an illness overtake a relationship. And what I mean by that is we're so focused on the love, care, and commitment for the person it's entrusted in our care that we forget about our own personal needs.
Absolutely.
And how do we combat that?
Right. Chris, we're going to share a document on your site. It's called the PARQ. And the PARQ has been around for a long time, but it's gone through an update that's just incredible for 2020. And the PARQ will help all of us. If you go through and answer the questions on the 4 pages, it talks about, are you ready for an exercise program? Are you ready to move forward? And what is it that you need to discuss with your doctor before you start that exercise program? So that it's not the illness that we're talking about, it's your overall health that we're looking for. And exercise is going to be an important part of that, but you have to be physically ready to do it.
Well, I think that is a perfect time for us to take a break. And when we come back from the break, let's dig into the PARQ a little bit more in depth, as well as talk about how people can receive credit for caring.
Oh, great.
Okay, you're listening to Your Future Self on the Whole Care Network. We'll be right back. Hey, it's Christopher McClellan from the Whole Care Network. Are you interested in writing for our new blog, The Bulb? Have a story to share? interested in podcasting or creating your own show on our new streaming radio channel, have a course you'd like to create on WCN University, lead a mastermind, let us help you shine a light on your work, and remember, you always own your own content on the Whole Care Network. To learn more, email us at wecare@wholecarenetwork.com or visit us online at wholecarenetwork.com, and you'll see a variety of ways to get involved in the Whole Care Network. And be sure to download our new app on Google Play or at the Apple Store. Our app provides you total access to everything WCN, including access to Credit for Caring, where you can select care products at wholesale prices delivered right to your door. Come grow with us, the Whole Care Network. All care, all the time. Now, let's get back to Monica and Chris. Well, welcome back. We're continuing our conversation with my younger sister from another mother, Monica Stanchula. Monica, you just jumped right in with my next question before the break. So let's dig into the PARQ.
Oh, the PARQ is great. So if you pull it up on your website, you'll see that the PARQ is all about looking at all the different aspects of yourself physically, so that you're ready to do an exercise program.
Right, and our the PARQ for listeners, you'll be able to go to the wholecarenetwork.com, look for your future self, and you'll be able to see all of our downloads of not only of our shows, but all of our content that you can access, including PARQ.
Right.
See, I jumped in on you, Monica. So
you sir did. So the PARQ stands for Physical Activity Readiness Questionnaire for everyone. And it truly is for everyone. In fact, you should actually fill this out and discuss this with your physician before you start an exercise program. So it asks you some general questions to begin with. And then after that, it dives into, do you have back problems? Do you have arthritis? Do you have cancer? Do you have heart conditions? It really It goes into the most important elements of your personal health that you need to think about before starting or increasing your level of exercise. Once you've completed this form, you need to show it to your doctor and discuss it with your doctor. Okay, doc, what is safest for me to do? Because, Chris, did you know that people that are taking a water pill are at a higher risk of, fainting when they're exercising? Because they become dehydrated?
It makes sense, but I did not know that.
Right. So something that seems so innocuous as just taking that water pill to make sure that your blood pressure stays in line is something that needs to be discussed with your doctor. Because if you're going to be sweating and you're going to be doing a lot of physical exercise, no one wants you to get hurt.
Right. And it's very important that we emphasize that everything that we're discussing today is for general knowledge only.
Right.
Always check with your doctor before starting any exercise program. But this form, this PARQ, as I look at it, it's almost like a reality check for somebody who is getting ready to start an exercise program. If you're seeing, I could already put in a couple of no's. I'm thinking when and a lot of yeses. I'm thinking, this is a good tool for me to have, especially if somebody like myself has been somewhat sedentary.
Right. And coming out of a caregiving experience, it's really important to find out, take an assessment of where you are now. Where is your body now? What are you ready to do for your future self? And this form is just a great way to set you on the right track to get that started. So I highly recommend using this form. And as Chris said, neither of us went to medical school. So we're not going to be giving you medical advice, but please do show it to your doctor. Please do.
But we do have a PhD in caregiving, which has been self-taught.
Yeah. Hey, Chris, can I jump to another topic that I think is really important?
Would I ever deny you?
Thank you, my dear. So the next topic is sleep. When you were a caregiver, tell me how was your sleep impacted by caregiving?
Well, I learned how to sleep with one eye open.
Oh goodness. And tell me what that means for you, Chris.
What that means, what that meant is very, especially when you're in the height of the caregiving issue, whatever that could be, whether it's cancer, dementia, whatever your care partner is dealing with, you're dealing with it as well. And you're the advocate, and you're always worried and concerned about what is going to happen next. Is the person you're caring for, are they getting up and wandering at night? Are they up going to the bathroom? Sleep deprivation impacts your entire day. And for caregivers to find that healthy balance of sleep, goodness, if I was to go back and do this again, I would want to pay much more attention to my sleep patterns and how I could sleep better to make my next day better.
Absolutely. You know, this circles back to being able to have physical exercise. If you're in chronic sleep deprivation, you certainly aren't ready to exercise. So, you know, the one feeds the other. But I want to tell you about my experience with sleep problems when it was caring for my father. I was a long distance caregiver. And so I worried about my mother and my father. I mean, he was almost a foot taller than my mother. And he would get up at night, even though his balance was impacted by his illness. He would get up at night to go to the restroom and nothing was going to stop him. You need to know that too.
Yes.
And so she would try to wake up in time. But if something bad happened, there she was putting him in the car and taking him back to the hospital in the middle of the night. So my sleep was impacted because I was worried about, okay, I had a conversation with mom today. There's a high likelihood something bad's going to happen with dad tonight based on what she was saying. So it's a lot of time, it's not even the fact that you're physically next to the person, but it's that insidious worry that a caregiver has about the person they're caring for. And we have to find a way to manage that better as caregivers, because when we come out of that experience, my concern is a lot of people have such bad sleep patterns and they continue those on to their future self. And we know that sleep is very important for us to be able to remain healthy, especially as we age.
And that really takes us to why we're doing these podcasts, because we want people to be able to plan. We want caregivers to be able to plan for their future self, because it is in your control. And it's in your control by being aware of what your surroundings are and what you're dealing with. And taking care of yourself is job number one for all caregivers. Easier said than done.
Boy, it is easier said than done, because Chris, you and I both know that when you're a caregiver, no one walks in the door and asks how you're doing. They ask about the person who is sick. Everything focuses around the illness and that person. And it's hard to distinguish yourself from that. But what you and I can do is help people to understand that there is a difference. You have to be cared for as well. You are an individual separate from the person that is sick, and you have to take care of yourself along the way. And physically taking care of yourself is not something I'll do later. It's something that it's an intention that we have to make day after day. What about that 15 minutes for me? How about I go and just sit in the bathroom for 15 minutes and just have some silence? Just some time to yourself. Maybe some deep breathing exercises. Just things that replenish you as an individual is just as important as caring for someone else. And those habits will carry over after your caregiving is done.
It's creating those healthy habits. And now I'm thinking about Simon and Garfunkel and the sound of silence, and how peaceful silence can be in the midst of chaos.
Right. Right.
So, Monica, let's bring this back full circle. And before we close our second episode, let's talk a little bit more about credit for caring and how people can receive credit for caring.
Wow. Thanks, Chris. So we built Credit for Caring because we know busy caregivers and just people in general, first of all, don't have time to go out and do shopping for all these items, nor do they know what they're looking for sometimes. How many of you know about a dressing tool? How many of you know about a special plate to allow someone to eat independently because of the way it's designed and the way it adheres to the table? These are things that, I've learned over the years working in rehabilitation as a social worker, working in home care as a social worker, and we bring that knowledge to you by bringing you the best products that we could find that are in this field of aging and caregiving. They're available on the website. Chris, they're going to be available on Whole Care.
They're available on the Whole Care Network website, just as you listen to our podcast or visit the Whole Care Network, just look for Credit for Caring. It'll be in our store menu, and you'll be able to access all these wonderful products at a discount that Monica has to put together for us.
Hey, and Chris, we've gone one step further. I just wanted to tell you about this because I'm really excited. We've also put them into bundles so that if you're dealing with, let's say you're dealing with toileting issues, we have a bundle that's specific for that of the right products you need to help someone with toileting. If it's you're helping someone with dressing, all the tools for dressing are right there, and they're all together. And once we bundled them together, we were able to offer even a deeper discount than we were when you buy them individually. A lot of people are bringing their loved ones home from nursing homes during this pandemic, and they want to care for them successfully at home. We want to make that easier for you. We want to make sure that we get you the right products for the right tasks at the very best price that we can.
And you'll be able to easily search all the bundles and all the products on the Whole Care Network, Credit for Caring. Monica, you're pretty awesome.
Thanks, Chris. So are you.
So if you had one favorite tip to provide for our physical pillar for our caregivers to import into self-care, what would that be?
I get one.
Well,
Okay.
You can have 100, but and we'll put those 100 on our website. But for this for this conversation, we're going to do one because it's appropriate.
Okay.
And I love putting you on the spot, which makes it even
you
better.
Certainly did. So my one recommendation would be for everyone to commit to spending at least 15 minutes outside in the sun. You can just go for a walk. You can sit outside and just take deep breaths, but 15 minutes out in new air, in open air, 15 minutes to yourself, 15 minutes every day.
I'll reiterate that by saying, caregivers, set a daily intention for yourself. Mm-hmm. And we'll take it even the next step farther. Set a daily intention for yourself for each pillar of care. And today we've been talking about the physical pillar of care. Monica, love doing this with you.
Likewise, Chris. Likewise.
We'll see you for another session real soon.
Great. See you then.
Okay. Hey, it's Christopher McClellan from the Whole Care Network. Thank you for listening to this episode of Your Future Self. And to learn more about our 4 pillars of care on the Whole Care Network, visit us online at thewholecarenetwork.com, where you'll see a full description of all 4 of our pillars. And while you're on our pillar page, just do a quick search for Your Future Self, which will take you to our landing page for this podcast, where you'll be able to grab your homework assignments, additional information and downloads, and see all the great discounts we have to offer through Credit for Caring. And be sure to subscribe to Your Future Self wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. We'll see you for another episode of Your Future Self real soon. This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time.